Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I'm only going to speak probably for 5 minutes. I've got losing my voice here, so we'll let you do some of the talking, hopefully in a discussion following this. I think there are three significant issues that we have to address in this race and in addressing here in our state in 2010. The first one, of course, involves putting Oregon back to work and addressing the 10% unemployment rate that we have statewide that is higher than that 16% in some parts of our state. The second one is managing through a $3.5 billion revenue shortfall or deficit in the next session. And the third, I think, is getting our arms around the cost of health care, which contributes to the first two. In terms of job creation, we have some significant opportunities for short-term job creation to help the 200,000 people who are out of work today. One of them starts with large-scale energy efficiency projects, beginning with our public school buildings. That is, bonding against anticipated savings and putting people back to work retrofitting our schools for energy efficiency. And that brings jobs to every part of Oregon because every part of Oregon has a public school building. And if we're intentioned in doing that and use Oregon products like windows from gelled wind, we can create even a larger ripple effect and put more people back to work in Oregon. The second one, I think, is in rural parts of our state where we have the opportunity to improve the health of our forests, particularly the large federal forests in northeast Oregon, by thinning to improve the health of the forest, but also creating wood for local mills and biomass for both energy generation and a new biomass industry. Woody debris can be taken and put through a process called torrefication, which turns it into small, very energy-dense chips, which can be used either for heating or can be used in a large generation plant like Boardman with a much smaller environmental footprint than coal. So we need to recognize that there's an opportunity to take the same infrastructure that we used to use for wood products in the traditional sense in rural Oregon and move that to a woody biomass and create good, well-paying jobs in rural Oregon as well. One of the challenges I think we face when we seek jobs in this new economy is not just jobs, but jobs that pay at or above the national average or have career paths that allow those individuals to move up. Because today in Oregon, the average per capita income is about 10% below the national average. And we need to be very intentional in our economic development policies to drive that back up in every region of the state, not just urban Oregon, but in southern Oregon and east of the mountains as well. The second big challenge we face is dealing with this $3 billion budget deficit. And I think the way we manage through that involves first not viewing this as a 2-year problem, but taking a 10-year look and asking ourselves what we want Oregon to look like 10 years from now, when the children who entered kindergarten this fall graduate from high school. And I think we want to live in an Oregon where we've eliminated the achievement gap on the front end, where every child is ready for school when they get to kindergarten, where dropout rates are going down and graduation rates are going up, where all Oregon high school graduates can participate in post-secondary education without remediation, and that 80% of them go on to get at least 2 years of post-secondary education. We can achieve that, but we need to look at our budget as an instrument to get there. And instead of viewing the next biennium as a cutting exercise, we need to ask ourselves, how do we take the money we know we have and invest it differently going forward to achieve those outcomes? Lay the foundation for reinvestment for Oregon's system of education and our critical social services in the next 2 years, and then as our strategies to get the private sector economy going begin to play in, those resources can go in 2013, 2015, 2017, guided by this vision to move Oregon to a much more stable, a much more economically secure future. The third issue we have to get our arms around is the cost of health care, which is probably the single biggest cost for families, for businesses, and certainly for government. As you all know, the federal legislation that passed earlier this year really wasn't health care legislation, it was health insurance reform. So it's given most people, by 2014, presumably a way to pay for health care. The problem is that it doesn't do anything about the big cost drivers, and those are embedded in how care is organized and delivered. Most of the money in the system, as we've discussed here in this very forum, go to treat people with one or more chronic conditions, and usually the acute complications of those chronic conditions in the hospital. What we need to do is seek waivers from the federal government to use some of those resources to create a big statewide demonstration project and delivery system reform that shifts the focus of our healthcare system from acute care management on the back end to prevention and wellness and the community-based management of chronic conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure. We have the opportunity to do that. In the late 1980s, we reformed Oregon's workers' compensation system, and that saved Oregon businesses $14 billion to date. Can you imagine the kind of competitive advantage we would have if we could do the same thing with healthcare? So, getting the private sector economy back on its feet, managing through this budget deficit with an eye to how we want Oregon to look 10 years from now, getting our arms around the cost of health care are, I think, the central issues in this debate and in this election. I'm disappointed that my opponent did not show up here today. This running for governor is like a job interview. And to date, he has not shown up at the Oregon Newspaper Publishers Association, the Urban League of Oregon, the Eugene City Club, the Portland City Club, or the Washington County Public Affairs Forum. If you seek to hold this office, it seems to me you have to show up and be interviewed by the people who are going to hire you. Every election is a choice, including this one. I've lived in and loved Oregon most of my life. As a doctor from rural Douglas County, as a legislator, and as a governor, I've spent most of my life in Oregon working for Oregonians, and particularly for those middle-class families who are struggling so desperately in this recession. I've stood up for, I think, Oregon values, not just middle-class families, a woman's right to choose, protecting our environment, protecting our resource land through our land use planning program. Those values are worth fighting for, but there's other things as well. We need jobs in Oregon, and I've created some, over 100,000 in fact. More importantly, I have a plan to create thousands of new jobs for the 200,000 people who are out of work today. By comparison, my opponent has proposed $800 million in tax breaks that will benefit largely upper-income Oregonians and won't create a single job for the 200,000 people who are seeking work in Oregon in 2010. And how will we pay for that? By taking money away from education, social services, and schools, the very things we need to make Oregon better. We have a choice in this election. We have a choice. I believe that the decisions Oregonians make in the next 3 weeks will have a huge impact on our state going forward. The values I stand up for are the ones I've fought for all my career. You know that, and I'll continue to do that. You can count on it. But here's something else you can count on. Oregon's best days do still lie ahead. I'm John Kitzhaber, and I'm asking for your vote on November 2nd.